Hello and welcome to the interview. With us today is a very, very special guest joining us all the way from New York. Her name is Akanksha Arora, and she set a very stiff target for herself. She wants to be the youngest and the first female Secretary General of the United Nations. Akanksha, welcome to WION.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you. I just want to say, first of all, my condolences and prayers with everyone in India who's suffering. Having gone through a personal loss of losing my grandmother to COVID earlier this year, I know the suffering. So my prayers and blessings with everyone in the country.
Right, it is a difficult time for everyone, and as you said, you can personally relate to this. But at the same time, you're also giving a lot of hope and inspiration to a lot of women across the world. You've set a very ambitious target for yourself, campaigning to become the youngest and the first female Secretary General of the United Nations. Why do you want to lead the UN?
I want to lead the UN because I believe in the UN. I know UN is capable of doing great things in the world, but the UN of today is failing. I'll give you a few examples. Today, we have the highest number of refugees, displaced and stateless people, 85 million. And these are not voters in any countries. They don't have social media to tell their story. They just have the UN to serve them. And UN is not able to meet their basic humanitarian needs of food, clothing, shelter, which leaves them to having to fend for themselves. And what options do these people have? They're trafficked, they're smuggled, they're lured to join terrorist organizations. And this is a human rights abuse and destabilizing the world. When it comes to development, in 1980, China's GDP was below all but 3 African countries. And look where China is today and where Africa is, that has received the most funding from the UN. When it comes to diversity, half of the world is women. We've never had a female Secretary General. Half of the world is under 30. Majority is youth. Youth have never been given a seat at the table. You know, when it comes to UN, they give us something called visitation rights. Come visit, clap on our speeches, but don't tell us what to do. Why? This is the time where my generation will inherit the UN. We want to be more involved. Climate crisis, which is something that we will have to deal with. The UN of today spends, for every dollar it receives, 15 cents on nature-based solution. Everything else goes in talking. So this is the time for someone like me, who's an employee of the UN, who knows how it is to be seeing things from decision-making to implementation and the projects not going where, and the money not going where it's supposed to go. A youth perspective and a woman perspective that deserves to be at the UN in decision-making positions.
And I've seen your campaign, it's very robust. Why do you think you stand a chance?
I think my campaign is robust because it's relying on people to be part of the UN more. The UN of today is a castle on the hill. It's an elite organization where only elite people have access. You must be top 1% rich countries, top 1% philanthropists, top 1% corporation or NGO. What about the 99% of us who want to make a difference in the world but are not allowed to? So my vision statement for the UN that I released is a UN that treats all people and governments equally, that allows private sector to be part of the solution. You know, the private sector today is not the same private sector of like 20 years ago. Today, everyone is engaged in community building. Everyone wants purposeful profit. They want to be involved. People, my policies are people-centric. You know, when it comes to development, we've tried so many models of Reaganomics. Give money to the top, hope it'll trickle down. I'm proposing a ground-up model of giving universal internet, universal education to everyone so people can develop, they can progress, they can prosper as a community, country, and the environment. And that's why it's robust, and that's why we've received support from so many people. Employees of the UN, they're my biggest supporters. Member states, you know what's interesting is I've had conversations with a few ambassadors, and this is what they tell me, I quote, if there is one person who can change the UN, it's you. Because you know the facts, you know the figures, you know the process, and you can inspire youth to be part of the UN. Like, you know, for far too long, my generation's like, oh yeah, UN. No. UN is our UN, and we will be part of it. So I think that's where the appeal is.
You're evidently not afraid to speak your mind. I think it's the most difficult to critique an institution while still being a part of it. And you're saying that the UN of today is not living up to expectations and not delivering to its full potential. I'm sure a lot of people across the world would want to know your personal story, Akanksha. How is it that you ended up joining the United Nations and coming up with a campaign to lead it?
I think you're right. every campaign is based on the personal story of the person. I'll start from the beginning. I come from a family of refugees. All four of my grandparents fled Pakistan after the partition, moved to India. On my dad's side, my grandparents were street vendors. They sold teas and samosas. On my mom's side, my granddad was a mailman with the government. He would deliver mail on a bicycle. They couldn't complete their education. Their goal was to make sure that their children are educated. So my parents are physicians. I was born in a family that values education and hard work. And I had a really fun childhood. I was born in Rohtak, Haryana. My parents were doing med school at that time. And I have fond memories of visiting my nani in Gurgaon almost every week, my dadi in Moga like twice a month. And at 6, we moved to Saudi. And Saudi was a great childhood for me too, because I was in a different environment and our neighbors were Saudi. They had 3 girls my age. I would have a good time. But Saudi didn't have schools for girls in English. I mean, there were schools in Arabic and I couldn't cope up with the language at 6. At 9, I moved back to India in boarding school. So that's where I was educated 9 to 18. And at 18, I moved to Canada for college. And at 30, like in Canada, I graduated in business summa cum laude. I was a manager with PricewaterhouseCoopers, wrote audit standards for Canada, taught at University of Toronto, audit. I wrote campaign financing guidance for Canada. And then I get a call from the UN. The context was that President Trump was elected, the current Secretary General was elected, and financial reforms was a big part of the UN. So UN has a budget of more than 50 billion. US contributes 10 billion to it. And we all know for every dollar, 30 cents goes to the cause. Everything else is bureaucracy. And President Trump was like, he wants to make sure UN is using the money they're giving towards the cause. So financial reforms was a big portfolio. So I was hired to serve on that. And I was like, when I got my contract, I was just thrilled to be invited to this castle on the hill because it's like a privilege to be there. You think, wow, it's only for like those who have power and connection and not for normal people. So I was delighted. When I joined the UN, I had no ambition to run for this top position. I was thrilled to be invited to serve in my own capacity as an expert. My decision to run is influenced by what I have learned while working here. And I'll share that journey from what I've learned at a professional angle and my personal story of courage. So my personal story, in 6 weeks of being at the UN, I got hit by a cab. I was leaving work late on midnight. It was February, and I used to live 20 blocks from the UN. So I was walking and I got hit by a cab. I was taken to the ER. I broke my knee. I had bleeding and bruising on left side of my body. And I didn't know if I would ever be able to make it. Like, I didn't know the extent of internal damage. And that's when I realized that, wow, if I had died today, what would my obituary read? Akanksha Arora was a selfish person dedicated to the pursuit of happiness for herself alone. Because truthfully, until that time, I had spent my entire life pursuing my own trophies, professional trophies, personal accomplishment. This used to be my radar in life. If something was within my arm circle, I would do it. I would donate a little, volunteer a little, but not play a big game in life. And here I was on my deathbed thinking, wow, I've been a taker my entire life. I've taken from my grandparents, my parents, community, women at large, or what have I given? And that's when I am a person of faith. And I was talking to God and I was like, please help me get through this. And I promise I'll dedicate my life to making a difference. So God lived up to his promise and I'm living up to mine. And what that translated into is 2 years I tried to reform the UN internally. But the UN, there are 2 UNs. There's a decision-making UN and there's an implementation UN headed by the leadership of the UN. And they don't want change. The UN of today is serving them. The UN of today is serving the politicians. It's serving leadership, that there is no appetite. So that's when I decided I'm going to run. And here we are.
Right.